Hi, welcome to Hamilton and Hazen, Behind the Mic. Join author M.L. Hamilton and me, I'm narrator Kelley Hazen, as we discuss our latest audiobook. Born from our 7 years of collaboration and more than 60 audiobooks we've produced together, listen to the ins, the outs, the ups, and the downs, the inside track you love to follow, Behind the Mic.
Welcome to Behind the Mic number 11. We're going to be talking today about our latest audiobook release, which is the Sanctuary of Eldon, which is the fifth book in the World of Samar series. And I think for both of us, it was, well, for me, from my writing perspective, this book, I told you in a conversation we had about a week ago, that I think this one for me was different because I think it was the first time that I pulled together all the threads of what storytelling and character building and world building really meant, and pulling all those threads together was where I felt this one was where I was the most successful for the first time. And you had a different, so why don't you talk to your kind of experience and what came from it, and then we'll talk specifically about how this book is different than the others in this series.
Well, I think that, hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Good.
No, I have a new haircut. I don't
I
know
know, I love it.
if you noticed.
Yeah, I did. I love it.
That being said, I remember, it's just funny because, before we do these, I'm speaking to our fans now. Before we record these behind the mics, Michelle or ML and I will talk, and we will, kind of rough cast what we're going to talk about. And our goal is always to do these behind the mics as close to the end of production as possible, because we're on that, we're on the crest of that wave, and it's all, the decisions have been made and it's all been finalized and it's all very exciting and everything. And if we wait too long, you're writing something else and I'm recording something else. And it's like, wait, what were we going to talk about? But what you said triggered it, because I was, earlier in my career, I wouldn't necessarily read the books before I recorded them. And there was method to that madness, because even in my acting career, my first take was, particularly for on-camera stuff, my first take was almost always my best take, because it was the most intuitive and instinctive, and before I could get in my head. But as these books, particularly the World of Samar books, became more complicated, and the Peyton books, I didn't know what language I was going to be speaking. It always seemed like a good idea to find that out ahead of time. But I was moved in particular by Sanctuary of Eldon, because it felt like a seminal work for you, having read so much of your work, right? I mean, I've read everything you've written, and maybe Dad is the only other person who can say that, and a huge number of fans, of course. But I mean, the point being that I'm familiar with and astonished by the fact that your work is not repetitious. It's not formulaic in the least. And the flip side of that was that the Sanctuary of Eldon seemed to go way beyond anything I had read of yours in terms of stringing all these disparate threads and these different perspectives and these different methods of storytelling. I mean, you didn't even rely on a single device, like case in point, the way that the device of the Senate Ethics Committee was used to organize pirates in Las Vegas. I mean, this just, and that's part of what makes, in my opinion, and as you actually said in writing in a text, why Sanctuary of Eldon is probably our finest work to date, is that it's just, and I think maybe in that, and you had asked me this right before we got started, I think maybe in the reading of your Do you think people think when we do these, we just do these so we can pat each other on the back? Because we always talk about how great each other are. Or is it are or is? How great each other is? How great each other are? Who knows? Tell me later. To read a thing like that inspired me, but also set a bar for me to bring my very best. And it was subliminal. You know, it wasn't like I was going, well, I've got to do something to be as, you know, it wasn't that. But so when I was reading it, and it came in the reading, not in the recording, it came, I heard, and so let me just back up. Those of you who are watching this, who follow me in particular on Facebook, Kelley Hazen narrates at Storyteller Productions, I think is the name of my Facebook page. Could be Storyteller Productions, but anyway, I posted in real time, not daily, but frequently, about the recording process. And this came to me as I was reading it, that I wanted to approach the end of the book as you had so brilliantly, you just pushed the envelope. I don't know how people will be able to put this book down or take their earbuds out from about the, 5 chapters to the end. It's a straight listen. It's got to be. And it was a straight record for me. I knew that I could not break that. I could not break that up.
It was a straight listen for me. I knew I couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the reading of it to prep, I heard a device, an aural device that we had never used before, very specific to the time period and to the events that are going in time period, right? Because this is its own unique time period, but who cares? It just, I heard this thing and it was like, we've got to do this. And of course the big elephant in the room is Bruce. It's like, okay, because I get an idea and then it's, can we actually do it? And will you want to do this? Because this called specifically on his skills as a musician and as an artist. And, if he didn't hear it, if he wasn't as, as motivated or inspired as I was, if he was like, get it, oh, well, good idea, but, so, so that's, and I mean, I'm being intentionally vague because
no spoilers.
Way. Yeah. It's really special. It's really special. And so as I was telling you right before we got started, it allowed me as an artist to bring skills to the table that I haven't been able to utilize exactly since the last time, or the many times that I directed theater, when the director's vision is responsible for the whole experience of the play. What music is played in pre-show, if there's any incidental music played within, how the actors move, to a large extent, how the actors interpret, the casting, the director's responsible for all of that. And it's the director's vision that shapes it. And while I certainly shape all of the audiobooks I record largely, with collaboration with the author, this took it to a new plane. So, edit out any of that long explanation that you went to, but that's what that was all about.
So, right. So our listeners will know that there is a very special auditory sensation that comes in. I'm not going to give anything away, and I'm not even going to talk about when it happens, but what it brought to mind, and I was telling you this, is how sound, we are, humans tend to be very sight-oriented creatures, and we don't think about the other senses as much. until something, you brought up the word triggers. I kind of hesitate to use that word because it's so politically loaded, but until something triggers a memory or a thought or an experience. And that happened to me this weekend. I had gone down to San Francisco to see my son for his birthday. And we went to the Academy of Sciences. And in the Academy of Sciences, they have an earthquake experience. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I was in the 1989 earthquake. We were crossing the Bay Bridge when the earthquake struck. We had just literally gotten on the other side of the Bay Bridge.
Oh my God.
And it was an experience that, nobody that lived through it will ever forget, because it was quite dramatic. And the thing that saved, so only 63 people died in something that could have been horrific. The thing that saved everybody's lives was the World Series was happening, and it was Oakland versus San Francisco. And so it was a battle of the Bay, and everybody had either gone home to watch it on TV, or they were in Candlestick Park at the time to watch the game. So we literally made it across the bridge in record time, because there was nobody there. Everybody was at home waiting to see the game start. So the thing that saved our lives was literally the baseball game.
Wow.
And so when we went to the experience this weekend, we walked in and they show you a video and they talk about the 1906 and the 1989 earthquakes. And I said to my sons, I was with my two sons and my son's girlfriend. And I said to one of my sons, I said, I don't know. Just watching the video, I said, I don't know if I can do this. And he's like, they looked at me like I was crazy. And so then we go in and they have the room set up like a house, and they have plates on the wall, and they have a chandelier overhead. And I was okay. I got in there, and it's pretty tight in there. And of course we were wearing masks. And so that, added to this kind of claustrophobic sense that I had walking in there. But what happened was they started playing the baseball game. And just telling you this, I full body chills right now. They started playing the baseball game. And I remember we were listening to the baseball game on the radio when the earthquake struck. And it was the pregame setup. And hearing it, I broke out in a cold sweat. And I told my youngest son, I said, I don't think I can do this. I've never had something come over me like that. I gripped the thing and I closed my eyes, and the shaking was bad. They did it for, I think, 30 seconds. That was bad. That was very upsetting. But it was hearing the sound of the baseball game that really triggered that response in me. And I literally, once we got out, I had to go outside. I was in a cold sweat, and I was shaking, and I had to go outside. And I've never had an experience like that. And I can only imagine in what small way that might have been similar to what somebody who has PTSD experiences. What it brought to mind was when I heard what you guys did in the audiobook, in a good way, in a positive way. It gave me chills, because it had that same feeling, that just immersion. Like all of a sudden I wasn't in my house anymore. I was in the place that the audio comes from in the book. And I could see it, and I could feel it, and I could smell it, and I could, because of that sound transported me. And I think it was a stroke of genius. Both you and Bruce adding that in. And I can remember getting the text saying, we've done something, we're waiting to hear what you think about it. And I kept thinking, because you don't know what to expect, because you were very circumspect about it. And just as we're being right now with our listeners, I was like, what did they do? And you said, if you don't like it, we can take it out. And I thought, well, what in the world did they do? But when it happened, I knew the moment it happened that was what it was. It was that visceral. And that's the only word I can think of. It's that visceral feeling you get that transports you to another place. And sound, I think, has a way of doing that more than any other sense. Maybe smell can.
But anyway, don't let that stop you. That is, what a story. I think we've all had the experience of a song,
Yes.
you know, that'll take us back, like just take us back. And that's one thing, you know, and I do think that's an incredible example of the power of what sound can do. That
Right.
and the point that you make, that we miss so much by not being aware of how valuable our other senses are. You know, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you make your business from sound, right? I mean, that's um
yeah, and yeah, uh, it the when Bruce and I were doing the effect that it was really interesting because he laid down all these licks, and he, you know, I told him what I wanted, and I or what I envisioned, and language is not always our best form of communication. And so I talk too much and he shuts down way too early. Like a lot of marriages. But so he went then on his own and he laid down a bunch of licks, and then came time to apply them, because this effect is not used once. I think it's used about somewhere between 7 and 11 times. And it's not the same effect. That was the thing, is that so he played the recordings of these licks, and then and it was I think we talked about this before, I don't know. I cannot take criticism as an artist. I mean, I have to respect somebody so much for them to be able to tell me anything. It's a downfall, right? Because I think you can get a lot of really valuable information from criticism, positive, you know, or constructive criticism. He had just no ego. Everything he did was great, but it wasn't quite exactly, you know, what I heard. And so we went in together to go through each section. And it was kind of fascinating because it's not that I don't listen to my work, but I don't listen to my work immediately after doing it very often. And so I was literally listening to like the last 30 minutes of this book, or 45 minutes or hour or whatever it was. And went in and re-recorded. I realized that I had actually misinterpreted some stuff. And part of it was because you're in that momentum, right? That we talked about being important, because that's the sense and that's the pace and that's the drive of that last section of the book. But in the doing of that, you know, it could have, I went, oh my God, that's completely not right. And sometimes it would just be like a hunk, you know, of a paragraph, just like, that's not quite right. So that opportunity was there. But when we got to the part of actually putting in the licks, we took like the front of one, or we took one, and then we took a section of one of his other licks and butted it up against that. And then, so he'd done all this work, and we actually used just two little pieces, the A phrase, the B phrase, and then we repeated the A phrase, or we repeated the A phrase as the C phrase, right? And then you think of poetry or whatever. And so then there was the opportunity where then we would use A, B, and C. And then there were other times when we just used A or A, B. And it was amazing how just once you established the theme, that then when you reinterpreted the theme by like not finishing it or only hinting at it, what a different message it would send, particularly within the context of the scene that you had written and how it fit together. And while we were down here, one of the ways we knew that we had it is like, and it's really interesting when I can't imagine how anybody else does it, but we sit there and my voice, you know, plays back. And then I will come in, sitting there next to him, I will come in with the next word, indicating how long the pause should be, you know, and then he'll re-edit it, right? And so it was the same thing with these licks, is we put the lick in and we would both of our shoulders went up and the hair on our arms stood up. It was right. You just, you know, so that's, you know, and I mean, it's certainly subjective, you know, I mean, it will be subjective to the listeners, as you know, so somebody's going to listen to this and I know we're going to get a review that's, what's the big deal? You know, it's like, that's fine. You know, I mean,
well, but you know what? I think that's good though. I think if you get that review, what's the big deal? You know, you've done your job right because it's seamless. That you know that it's not been obvious. It just seemed like a natural place for it to. You know what I mean? I think sometimes when someone's like, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" You know, then that's a good indication that you've done it right. You've hit the right tone, and it's not pulled anybody out of the experience. They've been immersed in it.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I knew we were right when you said it was totally immersive.
It was.
Yeah. And it does. You're right. You actually, and now actually what you just said makes infinitely more sense to me than it did like 3 seconds ago. Isn't that great? So yeah. I mean, I can't wait. One of the next things I want to do is speak with audiobook reviewer Charla White at Audiobook Reviewer and see if they're interested in reviewing it, because they've been so supportive of the Samar series. They like it so much, and they're such a wonderful organization for audiobooks that if you don't know about audiobookraviewer.com and you love audiobooks, find out about them immediately, because particularly for fantasy, epic fantasy and that kind of stuff, they are the word to watch. So I'm interested in how she and her staff will respond.
So you mentioned briefly about the Facebook post, and I was telling you where you were doing as you experienced it, and those were so interesting to me, and I'm sure to the readers, because it was an inside, you know, the author or the artist studio kind of thing, of being able to see the interior thought process and where you were and what you were thinking as you were recording those. And I think that kind of goes to some of what we were just talking about, is that when we're done, if the reader doesn't know, or the listener doesn't know what all went into the making of it, then we've done a good job. But it's nice to see that internal process and how where you are in life and in your experience, how it came forward in the production of the audiobook. So those were really interesting. And we talked about that you weren't getting as much reaction from those as you do something where the dog is on there or the cat. But I was saying, but I think those aren't necessarily, I don't know that those are interactive. I think it's an insight into the process that people don't maybe have the experience of, and maybe don't know how to respond to it. But I do think that they are so valuable because they give that unique perspective. And as an author, it gave me insight into it's always interesting what you respond to. Sometimes it corresponds to things that I thought almost exactly. And sometimes you pick up on things that I didn't even see. And that talks, you know, again, that's that whole, once the book leaves our control, it's the listeners, the reader's experience that comes to bear on it.
And that's, you know, it's mentioning the post again makes me think of a couple of things. When I talk to authors, and you and I have had this conversation about, you know, you and I are in business together, and I am in business with a number of the authors that I work with, to the extent that we both make money when these audiobooks are purchased and listened to. And so promoting them and marketing them is a responsibility that falls to both of us. And any number of authors that I speak to always experience such frustration because, you know, you can say what you want to say about social media, but it is hands down the strongest zero budget opportunity that we have to get word out about our audiobooks and to get them into people's hands and ears, you know, our books and our audiobooks for independent producers like myself and authors like yourself. And so very often before I go into business with somebody, we have a discussion about, hey baby, if you don't promote it, you know, nobody's going to know it's out there if you don't, you know, and I do my part. Yeah. But I struggle, as do they, because I often hear this with, oh, you know, I don't know how to do Twitter. I don't know. I don't want to be on there. I don't, it feels so phony. It feels so, and so there's always, I mean, I think we all of us who, well, maybe everybody, you know, I mean, I know people that have gotten off of, just from a personal point of view, they've decided to get off of social media because they just felt too weird. They felt like, you know, if they weren't posing, then they weren't, you know, if they tried to be honest, if they tried to be that social media, that wasn't the place for it. And I think there's a constant search for how to be on there, particularly from a professional point of view, how to be on there authentically. You know, not only from how you want to present yourself and what you as an individual want to be a part of, but also from the perspective of if all you ever post is buy my book, buy my audiobook, you know, that's not interesting. And this was the first time, I mean, this was the first book that I decided to do that, you know, and having read the book and, you know, all these juices were flowing and all these thoughts and it happens all the time with all the audiobooks, you know, these thoughts came up, but it was the first time I thought, you know, why don't, and it's just, marketing is such an interesting thing. I mean, how to sell a thing, you know, I mean, you try something and it either works or it doesn't work, right? And so you can either throw it out or you can tweak it.
Throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and so over time, you know, I keep trying to come up with an approach that I feel like honestly represents me, that is also something organic and authentic that someone would really be interested in looking at, that I'm contributing to the noise rather than ruining it, or just not contributing to the noise, but rather redefining the noise as something interesting, right? From the part that I'm putting in there.
Right.
And so those posts were, I felt really good about them. Yeah. I mean, I really, you know, part of it was how the book was affecting me and the recording was affecting me ideologically and spiritually. And some of it was just, you know, hey, this is what we do when we record, you know, considering that on Facebook, my audience is made up of listeners. They're made up of friends and family, but they're also made up of other audiobook narrators, other authors. Yeah. You know, when people are considering me to narrate their books, I hope when they do their research, you know, they're taking a look at my Facebook page and how I'm presenting myself publicly. So anyway, that's, yeah. And they turned out really good. I actually intend to take each one of them and turn it into a post on my blog so that they don't disappear forever. Yeah, that's and then and to continue doing it, with so yay. And and this is interesting, and I haven't told you this yet. All of a sudden, a lot more people are paying attention to my Facebook page. Yeah. I can't say that the number of followers have I actually haven't looked at that. I just know that posts that were going ignored, or I'd get maybe one or two, you know, likes or or whatever. Now it's more like 16, 17, 20, you know, and people are actually commenting and sharing. So that's it. That says to me, as it does in social media, right, that I may that whereas where the posts about my recording weren't posts that people felt appropriate to comment on, they're paying attention and they are feeling closer to me
Yeah.
and wanting to engage and feeling more maybe a part of my page, because I've found a way to be honest and vulnerable with them that makes them feel like I'm sharing with them, I hope.
Exactly. I think that that's what it is. It's the interaction as a human being with other people, and letting them see inside, you know, to
Yeah.
what that you're comfortable with. I think that's why social media is so important, because it's you know, as much as it can be a pit of despair, it can also let people see that they're not alone, or that their experiences aren't, you know, unique.
Bill Maher, I really, well, at times in my life, I've enjoyed Bill Maher on HBO and his political comedy shows and stuff. But he has terrible things to say about particularly Twitter. And I think in the political world, there's a faction and Twitter is misused and people are canceled and blah, blah, blah. But there's a wonderful community of writers and readers and listeners and narrators on Twitter. And I mean, I don't have a sense of the vast majority. I only know what little corner I engage with, but those are really largely, they appear to be really supportive, kind, fun, and I think it's too bad that the whole industry or whatever the best word, right, that it gets trash.
Because that's what we do. We paint everything with broad brushstrokes, right? I mean, there's no nuance to anything. And yeah.
So
unfortunately.
I feel like my son and his wife, because I mentioned, that I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter and I think they only do Instagram, but I'm, because Instagram is like the new, I don't know what, or it's the old, right? Because now it's TikTok or whatever. But I think they are disappointed in me that I'm on Facebook, and I'm always like, well, it's for the audiobooks. But gosh, it just seems like we could be more open, more kind, less judgmental, less critical. I think our culture has fallen into that way. I know I'm way too judgmental, and I'm working to change that.
Yeah. Well, I hope most of us are,
This gives me an opportunity to ask you a question. Speaking of spirituality and religion and stuff like that, and philosophy, for lack of or let's throw another word in there. All right. There's a bit, not a small bit, in Sanctuary and also in the Spirit of Eldon, where our hero Talar is gaining or trying to gain an understanding of his place in the world, in a world that has not been terribly kind to him.
Right.
I think I actually, I don't have it here. It's actually on that, on my camera, or I would read you the passage, but that the world is a dark place and that you have to be, you have to be prepared for it not to give you a great deal. And then through various interactions in the spiritual or the psychic world, he comes into contact with a new meaning for life. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I can only scratch the surface of it because it's deep. And but the time has no meaning, and that where we are is not necessarily where we are or where we'll stay. And it's an understanding of what happens when we're no longer on Earth, I think, is kind of what we're dealing with. So my question to you, please flesh that out better than I did. A, and number two, B, is this your beliefs? Are these your beliefs? Go.
So how can I say this in a succinct and non-verbose way? It's interesting to me, the book, and it was something I was exploring at the time, and I've always been fascinated with. My father was raised Catholic and rejected Catholicism as he became an adult. But there is this pull in him, I've noticed this struggle, tug of war between his Catholic upbringing and who he is today. And it's something that I don't think he's ever really resolved, because it was ingrained on him. And so to me, when I came to this book, I thought of this character Talar in some of the same terms. Here he is, he's in this tug of war between the very austere and rigid Nazarene faith, and then his own experiences with spirituality. And it's not a comfortable place for him. He fights most of his life to escape the Nazarene. And he, at the same time, when he's having these spiritual happenings that happen to him, he fights against those as well. And he thinks that he's going mad. And there's a moment where he faces just a crisis of spirit, that he has to reconcile those two halves of himself and come to some understanding that none of it matters. All of the best laid plans of mice and men are apt to go awry. That, as William Blake has said, it's that idea that nobody knows, nobody really can. We try, we say we know, we can't possibly know. But if nothing here has meaning and there's something more, there's a bigger purpose, then it does sort of free you not to do anything you want, because certainly that's not the path Talar ever takes. His path is always of helping people, guiding people, but that it frees you from being bound to these earthly hurts and ills. And as you were saying before, this idea that we're always critical, we're always trying to judge people. What does that mean, right? And so maybe in some, because I do think that authors write from their own, whether they're conscious of it, whether it's a deliberate act or not, they write from their own experience. Maybe it's that, maybe it's my own questioning. I've never been able to get behind organized religion, except for I have a lot of friends and family members who find that to be the way that they get through their days. And I am not one to ever discount that as powerful for those people that it works for. The rigidity, the ceremony of it doesn't necessarily work for me. I do see spirituality in things. I see the complexity of the world that we live in, the complexity of animals and plants. And I think there's got to be something more. There's got to be some greater purpose. I see things that happen that seem fated to me, our meeting for one, that I don't have an explanation for. And the only way that I can have an explanation for it is to throw it out there as a spiritual thing. But I don't think, and I don't know that Talar even comes to a full understanding, because he fights so hard to live. And yet at the end, it's I don't know that he ever, I think the one scene for me that was, I struggle with listening to, was the one where he's in the cave in Chernow. And I held off on listening to that because I knew it was coming. And I remember writing that scene, and I remember it being a very hard scene for me, because he has this crisis of moment where he realizes he is Nazarene. No matter what he's tried to do, there's some part of him that is that thing that he fought so hard against. And how do you reconcile all those parts of you with who you are, and coming to grips with his his relationship with his father, who he never knew. You know, I don't know that he ever even he's very angry with him, and I don't know that he ever resolves it. So I think that that's sort of the human condition, isn't it? I mean, we never necessarily are able to escape what we think we've cast off. Mm-hmm. And yet we're always striving for something greater than what we are. We always want some touch of immortality or purpose or reason for why we are. And I think that's where it's at. And I hope when our listeners listen to it, they don't think I came up with an answer, because I don't have one. And I hope that that comes across, that it's okay not to know what the answer is to that. I don't know if that.
No, that it's great. That I think that you answered the question. You answered the question, the exact question I put forward to you.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I had a conversation with my hairdresser yesterday that was not that far removed from what you just said, although not nearly as eloquent, but we were both discussing incidents from our childhood and blah, blah, blah. And some adults who had, it was the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Oh, yeah. To really change this conversation entirely. But we were talking about childhood trauma, which for some people, you know, was Catholicism in more ways than one, right? Not just.
Right. No, absolutely.
But yeah. And the realization that this baggage, you know, that some of us have more of than others, no matter how much therapy you go through, you know, I mean, and that's the extreme, right? There's the extreme of the people who never can get enough distance on it to see that there's a pattern that's repeating and that they can choose to stop the cycle, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, to the people who see the pattern and choose to be the one to stop the cycle, or at least try it, right? But even if you're on that far end, that baggage, you know, it's with you for the rest of your life. You can put it in the basement, you know, you can put it up in the attic, it doesn't have to be strapped to your back your entire life, but it never goes away. Yeah. And it will. And the upside is that if you have self-esteem, you honor and embrace what of that experience made you who you are, right? You know, whether it's the survival of it or the experience of it or whatever, right? It's still, you know, but it's there. And it's how you deal with it when it chooses to unpack itself.
Right.
Because it's
an inconvenient time.
Yeah. And it surely will. Yeah. You know, and and that's the only thing, you know, and I think that, because I remember thinking when I was much younger and I had completed my first round of therapy that, you know, that I'm so glad I'll never have to deal with this anymore. You know, and then X number of years later, you know, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of some bad situation, still reacting with those old habits that came of what I experienced in my formative years. And it's like, look at that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like standing in the earthquake experience in San Francisco. No, it is. It's and I think
life is a baseball game.
Life is a baseball game. I think that
have you heard about Banana Ball?
No.
That's for next behind the mic.
Okay. I think what it brings to mind is this idea that you brought up the Amber Heard, you brought up you know, and I think about the shootings that we have now, is this national trauma, recognizing that it's something that you're going to constantly have to face something that you're going to constantly have to talk yourself through is probably healthy. It's those people that refuse to ever face it, that refuse to ever realize this is something I'm going to carry with me forever, or it's going to be in my attic forever. That's where I think you have things that turn out so horrifically, is that person thinks that the answer is at the end of a gun, or the answer is at the end of controlling women's ability to have autonomy over their own body, or taking books out of classrooms, where literature allows us to experience similar things to what we've experienced through the lens of somebody else, and gives us some, it's so vitally important. That's why man has been storytellers from time immemorial, because it allows us to experience those things from a distance, and maybe unpack some of our own things at the same time and take a look at them. Because
see the similarities, at a safe distance. You're exactly right. Yeah.
And I think when we deny people that, when we deny them that ability, then it turns out into horrific, damaging explosions that we see constantly now.
Yeah.
I think the greatest danger facing this country is this push to try and control everyone else, and trying to control their life experiences and what they do with themselves. You're going to have people react in a very unhealthy way if the screw keeps getting turned. And I think we have to acknowledge that there's some very harmful elements in our society that are being allowed to have an extraordinary power over the majority. And I think it all plays into the same thing that we've been talking about this whole today. And that's where good fantasy, good science fiction paints a picture and makes you take a look at, in another world, what is happening in my world that's similar. And that's what good literature, good anything, any art of any variety does, is it forces you to reevaluate your own environment.
Couldn't say it better. She's speechless.
Well, so do you want to key up what we're working on next? Because I'm kind of excited about it. It's very different. I mean, it's
Tell me.
Well, we have the Silence of Eldon coming. We're gonna do a box set with the 3 Teller stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the end of the trilogy. The Moon Mage is coming.
The Moonlight. I've always loved, ever since you told me you were writing that, as soon as you said the Moonlight trilogy, I went, oh my God, the Moon Thief, Moonwalker. Those are the best titles. They're the best titles. I'm so excited to read the 3rd one and record the 3rd one, Moon Mage. Mage.
Yeah.
So that's actually, that'll be next, right? Moon Mage.
That'll be before Scions.
I think so. I think if you're ready to rock at the end of this month being June, then that'll be the next one. I mean, we might start Scions, but I don't think we'll get it finished by the time you give me Moon Mage. And I think just because it's shorter, we should go ahead and do it.
Yeah. So we got a lot coming out this summer.
Yeah.
And so just to kind of key up this thing, we'll have, again, the box set of the Eldon, the 3 Teller books, which is going to be a monumental, huge box set because those books are epic. Yeah. And then we'll have
this Sanctuary of Eldon came in at just under 28 hours of audio all by itself.
Crazy.
Yeah. Huge.
I think it's the biggest book I've ever written.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Then we'll have Scion.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have, coming probably towards the end of the year, we'll probably have the box set for the Moonlight trilogy. So a lot coming to our listeners.
Now, and your intention is to bring us another Zion Sawyer too, right?
There'll be another Zion Sawyer. There will be another Peyton Brooks early case, and then there will be another Christmas mystery coming. So we got a lot.
Yay!
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Kelley.
You bet.
It's a delight. And we will have this posted very soon. So look for our 11th Behind the Mic. And onward and upward, my friend.
And I would say so. We'll have something out in July, probably, right?
Yes.
Our next piece of audio will release in July, so that'll be very
time for road tripping.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us for Hamilton and Hazen Behind the Mic. Visit authormlhamilton.net and kellyhazennarrates.com to join our newsletters for more insider news and views. Today's episode is sponsored by Phoenix Publication Services, PPS, Digital Shepherds. Let us ignite your writing goals.